Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's good to see you. It's good to be here with y'all. In this video, I want to talk to you about what role does an addiction serve, if any. And there's a theory that I have that I'm excited to share with you guys about why we experience addiction, why we become addicted to a substance that could potentially kill us down the road, right? And I love to unpack this question, but before we do that, we almost have to first define or get a basis for what addiction is. And in my opinion, addictions represent part of our personalities that are in deep need of healing and attention, right? And I don't fully buy into addiction being a disease. In fact, that's something that I've changed my tune after being presented with new information, after interviewing more people, just going about my journey, that I no longer say that addiction is genetic. Scientists have fully mapped out the human genome, but they've yet to find the addiction gene, right? It just doesn't quite fit there where that shoe shopping or the alcohol addiction or the gambling genes fit in the sequence there. So I no longer feel that an addiction is a disease, and pump the brakes, this is a good thing, right? Everything can be reversed in our life, especially with neuroplasticity. Okay, so what is an addiction? Again, let's define that a little bit more. Addictions are when we reach out for external substances to make this moment more bearable. It's when the edge of life is just a little bit too sharp. This present moment just doesn't feel good, right? And so we have to reach out for something else to make us feel good. And often we were equipped to deal with these really sharp present moments, but over and over, I believe in this fast-paced world, we encounter these moments that are difficult, right? Life is challenging. I think it's more challenging than ever now in 2021 than it's ever been. Okay, and so if we know what an addiction is, right? But what role does it serve? And has it been around forever? All right, no, it has not. You saw where that was going. So in the book, The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, with Dr. Gabor Mate, who's in my opinion, he's the addiction guru in this space. I love that guy. I love reading his stuff, and I've learned a lot about addiction from him. And what he says, there was this line in that book, I was reading it on the airplane, flying to Costa Rica, and I had to put the book down. I said, what did I just read right there? And I read it back, I picked it back up, and it said, most anthropologists agree there is no record of addiction pre-modern times. Another way to say that is prior to 300 or 400 years ago, addiction wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a thing. Another thing I want to throw in here is most anthropologists agree that the happiest of hunter-gatherers, the happiest of human beings, were hunter-gatherers, right? I mean, this is like 40, 50,000 years ago, and there's still some hunter and gatherer societies today that are apparently the happiest of human beings, right? And I agree with this, and I'm going to tie this in shortly. That's the plan, at least. All right, so addictions, they didn't exist in pre-modern times, right? And so I believe that addictions are representations that something in our environment is out of line. It's not sustainable. It's not enjoyable, right? We can't feel happy or whole in this present moment or given our current surroundings that, we don't feel good, right? And we have to reach for an external substance. So addiction right now is at an all-time high. We are currently in a pandemic, but before that, we were already in a pandemic that we just didn't hear that much about, right? That was the addiction epidemic. And then once this COVID pandemic softens out, we get that figured out, then, hello, new pandemic. That's kind of already, that was already there before, is the addiction pandemic. And I would be glad to be wrong on this, but I don't think I am. And this isn't just addiction to alcohol. I know that's what brought you to this channel, but really addictions across the board are kind of the same if we keep those fundamental definitions in place, right? That we're reaching for an external substance when this moment becomes unbearable, or there's a sequence of present moments that just suck, right? And a lot of it has to do with our external environment. Okay, so the addiction epidemic, or the pandemic, or whatever, there's going to be a lot of people when COVID goes away they'll say, oh God, now I'm addicted to this, to that, and mental health is just going to explode. All right, but does it serve a purpose? That's a good question. Does it serve a purpose? My answer to this is hell yes, it does. And in biology, this is called endowment theory. There's nothing that exists in the universe, there's nothing that you, like on your body, right? You have 5 fingers because you use all fingers, right? The same thing with the pineal gland. If it wasn't supposed to be there, like it wouldn't be there. And I feel that's the same thing with an addiction, is if it didn't have a role in society or in our world, it just wouldn't exist. So it's doing something. And you know, the first couple years after I quit drinking, and probably for about a decade before that, I had labeled my addiction, the entirety of it, as bad, right? And I'll be honest with you, it sucked. From ages 24 to 27, I owned a bar in Spain. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. It was a huge goal of mine. After I graduated college, I wanted to go buy a bar in Spain. I did it. But alcohol was just like, hey, we got other plans for you. And it was challenging. It was painful. Yeah, and I went down a road where I almost lost my soul, and I had to get it back. And what a journey, right? Well, the soul wants adventure, and hell yeah, what an adventure. Jesus, and it's still going. You know, but I labeled the entirety of the addiction is wrong, right? Like I did something bad, or it was bad, right? And I had labeled it incorrect. All right, so, and mostly the reason why is the amount of doors it's unlocked now. Okay, so does it serve a purpose? There is a massive divide in the whole world right now, and especially in America. There's a huge divide. And, you know, what's the one thing you say to yourself when you're watching the news, you're seeing all this just asinine bullshit, like level 10 bullshit going on out there? What's the one thing you like when you stop pointing fingers? It's like after you do, oh, it's their fault, it's their fault, it's their fault. Look at the plank in your own eye. After you start doing that, you're going to say one thing. You're going to say, why can't we all just come together, right? Why can't we come together and recognize that there's something more important than the wall or human rights and all, I mean, all the very important stuff, right? But like, when can we put our differences on these very important matters? When can we put our differences aside and recognize something's more important, right? Okay, so that is something that society needs to do across the globe, right? We need to get a lot of people into a room and hammer out some issues and get on the same page on climate change, right? Global warming. We are at an age right now where the threats to our whole species are all man-made. Seriously. Okay. And I think the timing, you know, with climate change, with nuclear, you know, there's big questions of nuclear war. With this stuff, the timing, we're like tipping points with these things. And then there's this thing called addiction that shows up. All right. Back to that question where I said, you know, what's the one thing we need to do? We need to come together, but it seems really difficult. In fact, the people can't do it, and you're seeing examples of that in the outside world. But there is a subset of people that is growing that can do this extremely well. They can meet in groups, and they can be different colors. They can wear different hats with different sayings on the hats, and they can be themselves, and people can get past that self that they don't resonate with, or they're focusing on the differences and not the similarities. But there's a group of people that can come together in a room and make it through anything regardless of the external bullshit. And those are the people who are sober, who have quit drinking, who have done the inner work. And, you know, it wasn't until I went to like a couple 112-step meetings where I realized this. I said, wait a second, like where on earth can you get people with all these different backgrounds, states, countries, educational levels, completely different backgrounds in one room, and it's not a full-on brawl, and not only that, but people are talking, they're listening, they're not talking over people, and at the end they're hugging and they're embracing each other, and it's a beautiful family. It is. It is, and that is what, that's a gift of addiction right there, and that is what I think addiction, the role of it in society, right? I actually think it's our group of people that lead us out of the unfuck yourself movement for human beings. I believe it's the people in recovery, and this is my theory. And the cool news about my theory, I think in my lifetime I'm going to find out if I'm full of shit or not. Seriously, I do. But I think it's the people who have done the inner work, who've decided they can't rely on these external substances any longer. I think it's this group of people that set the footprint and consciousness for others of how to do the same. They're going to create the roadmap. But why are we the group of people that does this? Well, we have to reach such intense, we are a subset of people who reach such intense emotional pain that many people who live on planet Earth right now will go through their entire life and they won't experience a fraction of the emotional pain. And oftentimes emotional, physical, the body and mind, it's really not even a difference. It's kind of the same thing. So, in biology, and this is called evolution, when things go through intense pain, they're forced to grow. And it's almost like become a new species. This was the enlightenment of the flower 114 million years ago. Enlightenment of the plant species 114 million years ago was the flower, right? And the first animal to walk out of the ocean, not because it wanted to go check out the earth, it was because the body of water somewhere was shrinking. It had to evolve, right? And it reached such intense moments of extinction or such an intense tipping point where it was life or death. And this is what addiction does. It gives you the choice of life or death. And we all know that not everybody chooses life. And addiction is, I'm simplifying this, but addiction it's dangerous, right? It kills so many people. But to have your back against the wall and have that choice to choose life or death, it's almost a blessing that normal people don't get to experience that, because you recognize what the addiction is. It's a wake-up call in your life. It's a wake-up call for a species at the same time, but it's a wake-up call on the macro and the micro level. And so it's an invitation to wake up and really see life differently and hear the birds again, hear the crickets again. And again, not everybody makes it, right? But that's the magnitude of jump that we are making as a species. And so this group of people, addicts, right? People who struggle with alcohol, we often put ourselves in the back of the societal queue, right? There's a lot of shame and guilt, and there's a stigma with it, right? But in fact, I'm going to swap it. I think we are the ones that are working on the inner resilience and the fortitude to recognize oneness in the world of duality. Like, we reach that intense moment of pressure in the brain, and there's a gap. There's like a split in the brain that we've never experienced before, because the prior way of life was so unbearable that it was almost like the whole record was picked up and moved and dropped in another spot. And that's done through presence, right? Like, there's such an intense moment of presence, the now, it's a powerful moment, that we haven't experienced it yet in our life, that the record, the needle, Alanis Morissette has a great song called Reasons Why I Drink. Check that one out, by the way. Link in the bio. I'll put a link to that for sure, why not? And it's such intense moments of pressure that we go through that the record is lifted up and completely set in a new groove, right? And that's what addiction does. It forces somebody to fully look within and say, uh-oh, this way of life is not working. All right. And I think the rest of humanity is going to have to cross that river, as the Buddha would say, in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I do. I really do. So I think that's the purpose that an addiction has right now, here in 2021, is to force us to make colossal change. Colossal. I mean, the greatest magnitude of change we have made as a species. And another way to say, I think the change that we're going to make is living life out of love versus fear, right? The whole economy, the whole way everything is structured is based off fear, right? And a lot of us are recognizing, after doing this recovery work, saying, wait a second, that model of fear of living your life from those stances, it's not sustainable, right? It's a world of scarcity, shall we say. But I'm excited. I think in my lifetime, I'm going to see if some of the stances that I have with addiction, and this one, I'll say prove. I don't want to use that word prove, but if they hold up, right? I can see it on the micro level with Cafe or in our own community, that addiction has forced people to make so much change that the people are two totally different, like their old life and their new life. You see these before and after pics all the time. And on the micro level, so macro level, I think addiction is going to force us all to work together. I think that's what actually gets us to work together. And on the micro level, like I said, it represents parts of our personality, parts of our being that are fully out of balance, right? And we need that yin and the yang to come back into balance and harmony. And most of these imbalances are with connection, and most of it's the connection internally, but it's connection with other people, right? And also be connection with food, with water, with nature, with the stars, all that stuff. We've never been so disconnected on the micro level, and we've never been so disconnected on the macro level. And this is what addiction does. It's a driver for us to find that oneness in the world of duality. And that's one of the biggest illusions of all time. In Maya, in Sanskrit, this is called Maya. The illusion that we are separate, that we're connected. So I feel it's addiction that forces us to really see that oneness in a world where everything is separate, where everything exists in the five sensory perceptions. If it's not there, it doesn't exist. But addiction, again, it's going to take that record needle and that groove that's gotten pretty deep on the micro, pretty deep on the macro level, and it's going to pop it off, right, and put it on a completely new track. And the only way for this to happen is through a shit ton of hard times. It's like, do I have to reach that fiery rock bottom before my new life awaits? Well, it's different for everybody. It really is. I mean, people's pain thresholds are different, right? But I know one thing: it's relative to everybody, right? Somebody calling in late to work 3 days in Q1 might be the same level of pain with somebody with 10 DUIs. Like, it's all this emotional threshold that we have. But these moments where we're fed up saying, I can't live with myself anymore. I can't live with myself anymore. And when you roll with an addiction, that becomes like the mantra. It's like, I can't do this. Like, what is I can't live with myself anymore. I hate myself. This is, then you start asking the questions like, who is the self, right? And it's that moment when you say, wait, who is myself? Like, I can't live with myself. It's just like, that's when the needle comes up. And that's the gap. You say, wait a second, like, maybe I don't have to live like this. And that's that moment of, moment of surrender. I mean, that's kind of how they say it in the rooms. But what it is, it's the gap, it's the space, it's the presence, it's the awareness that was never there before. And that's what was given to you with the addiction. So I think addiction actually creates a whole new species of human beings. And I think everybody has to cross this river, and not necessarily saying that everybody has to become addicted to a substance, but I think everybody needs to dramatically transform their consciousness, and addiction's a really good way to do that. Talking addictions for a second. This is the channel, but this is a channel about alcohol addiction, right? Which kills more people each year than every other drug combined. Crazy, right? Every other drug combined. But I don't think the alcohol addiction will even come close to touching the technology addiction. Or that we're already there, right? And screen time, TVs is one of them, but I'm talking more smartphones and that tech and artificial intelligences, because man, we're up against a big one there. But if these theories or these opinions that I have about addiction hold true, then I think we'll be okay. I really do, because I think we're going to find balance with our technologies and all that stuff. So, yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for rocking with me still. That was a fun video to make. So appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Yeah, let me know what you think an addiction is. Does it even serve a purpose or not? Right? So, all right, YouTube. Take care. Hey, I did just wink at you. Glad you saw it.